Welcome into the season debut of the Awesemo NASCAR Live Before It Lock show. Of course, I am Jason Foy as we're here to break down today's Busch class. And welcome back, Chris. Welcome back to the team. Great to be once again doing some shows with you here. Literally, right as we do this show, we've got the heat races going on. I've been watching them over there. You're the expert here. What are your takeaways from it, man?
Hey, thanks for welcoming me back. Glad to be back. Looking forward to a great season. I would say the main takeaway from these heat races so far is that the guys up front have been staying up front. And I think that's going to be a common theme as we see the actual race tonight at 6. Yeah,
that was my takeaway as I was sitting there watching it on the couch. I was just like, man, we just got to, slam the pole sitter here, because whoever was starting on the pole, pretty much, we saw a couple of races where there were some drivers who were able to maneuver up the race. But for the most part, the guy who's on the pole, he's just going to set the tone.
Yeah, I totally agree. Some guys in mid-pack were able to make some moves. We saw Blaney take it to Hamlin and move a couple guys. But if you are on the pole, you have stayed up there, and I don't see why that would change by the time the main race starts.
And of course, we're going to be reacting to everything that is going on. I got it over here on the iPad as the heat races are still going on. Last chance qualifying. So as this show goes on, that we're going to really have a deciding, okay, how are we developing our lineups here? Of course, salaries out there for DraftKings and FanDuel. I mean, even before everything that's happened today, when you look at the salaries, was there something that immediately stuck out to you?
Well, overall, the pricing is very soft today. Like, you can basically play whatever lineup you want. Before we knew anything about practice or anything, just kind of playing around with lineups, you can easily fit in like a Hamlin, Truex, Elliott with some other solid drivers in together. So there's going to be a lot of duplicates today, especially with only half a field than normal. But I mean, if you're looking to get different, there's many ways we can go about that, and we can discuss that later on.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we were talking before the show, because of the way today's race is constructed, we're almost hoping that a good portion of the field maybe is already put in their lineups, and they might have some drivers in their lineups that don't even make it to the main stage.
Especially with DraftKings posting the qualifying results from yesterday, which have nothing to do with where they're starting on today's race. So if you are paying attention, watching the stream like you are right now, I said there's a decent chance you have an edge on the field tonight.
Yeah, that's why I'm not putting my lineups together until after the show is over. We'll have an hour before we hit lock, so I can kind of decide what I want to do there in terms of that. As you think about, as you saw what you saw from qualifying, and now what we've seen so far in these heat races, did anything kind of change your mind after what you saw in qualifying as a comparison to what's going on right now?
No, the thing heading into this race, I thought a lot of people were going to take a more so place differential approach, which makes sense because this is an unknown race. We've never been to the Coliseum. It's a quarter-mile track, the next-gen cars. It was pretty much all a new thing. So stacking the back would make sense from a safety perspective. But after everything we've seen so far, I think for the most part, we see a somewhat calm race. There's going to be some bumping and banging, obviously. I think I wouldn't be surprised if we see a couple of spinouts, but we're not going to lose half the field. So for the most part, I kind of like staying with some of the guys starting closer to the front in mid-pack, because I feel like with the lack of laps, there's probably a pretty minimal pass, and the guys starting up front will probably finish up front.
By the way, speaking of spinouts and wrecks, Eric Amarola just getting a little wrecked there, going into the wall a little bit there. So have to see that as you were talking there in terms of that. But, I was watching the video you did earlier this week where you were talking about, dominators and how many dominator points are out there, because I do think because of where we're at in the sports calendar, the Pro Bowl is going on. So, I mean, obviously, if you played your lineups are in. So there's going to be a lot of people playing NASCAR that this may be their first time playing NASCAR DFS.
Correct. So when we talk about through the stream, you're going to hear several terms: dominators, place differential guys, scrub drivers, dominators. So on DraftKings, you get points for leading laps and getting fast laps. So those are going to be the guys called dominators. Now, it's a special group because you're not going to see a lower tier driver get up front lead laps typically. So that's reserved for the guys that are mainly pretty expensive for the most part. This race, kind of a bit of an outlier. Place differential guys, they're starting near the back. They can gain spots, but you get a point for place gained every single race on DraftKings. So it's kind of the terminology if you're brand new.
And as we're here live doing this show, you sent me over a list of the drivers who are currently in the main event. So we got Kyle Busch, Tyler Reddick, Justin Yaley, Joey Logano, Daniel Suarez, Chase Briscoe, William Byron, Kyle Larson, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., Austin Dillon, Christopher Bell, Michael McDowell, Ryan Blaney, Cole Custer, Chase Elliott, Eric Jones, Martin Truex Jr., Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Boy, in his heat race, for half that race, he is just battling off to get his spot into the main event.
And that's not surprising. I mean, we know he's an aggressive driver. I mean, he has the nickname Ricky Stenhouse or Ricky Stenhouse. You can even add on to that for a reason. But I mean, that can go either way tonight. He could be one of those guys that ends up getting spun out, or the aggressiveness pays off and he sneaks into the top 5 at a decent price point.
Don, appreciate your super chat as always. Always appreciate the super chats. Of course, if you got any questions, line those up in chat. One of the things we do want to do is talk about roster construction. You talk about dominators. We'll see kind of how it's going to play out with place differential. That's another term you're going to hear a lot of here today. We'll have to see what that starting grid ends up being. So we'll talk a little bit of that later on in the show. And any different philosophies today in cash games as opposed to GPP?
As of right now, I've plugged in a couple projections because we don't know the full order yet. But right now, I'm going to assume that Kyle Busch and Chase Elliott combos are going to be the stone cold chalk. You have Kyle Busch in the pole. He's probably going to lead the majority of this race. He's been fast in practice. He has the best odds in Vegas. I think he opened up around 1,000. He's now down at plus 550 on DraftKings. And Chase Elliott was the fastest car in practice by far, and he's now starting 15. So if you just pair those guys up together, you get the guy up front that can lead laps, then you get Elliott that can move his way through the field.
And of course, as I mentioned, if you do got any questions, be sure to line those up in chat. Of course, be sure to subscribe to also right here on YouTube. Got a ton of great programming for you each and every day. Of course, coming up right after us will be NBA Live Before Lock. These guys will get you ready for tonight's NBA slate. And be sure to subscribe to our podcast channel. And when you leave a 5-star rating and review with your Awesemo username or Twitter handle, you'll be entered to win a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. I'm going to tell you, we got a great offer. I'm going to tell you about a little bit here shortly for a season-long pass for Awesemo NASCAR coverage. Of course, myself and Chris will be here all season long on Sundays, live before lock to get you ready for the race course Daytona 500 coming up here in 2 weeks from now. It's the season's already here, so if you do got any questions, be sure to line those up. We'll get to you as we do go forward. Anything in terms of let's, I guess, start talking about the upper tier pricing in terms of DraftKings here. Of course, Kyle Larson, the most expensive driver on the board, 10,000 over on DraftKings. Or on FanDuel, he's 13,000. Same price for Denny Hamlin as well. So as you look at those upper tier salaries, what is there something that as we've seen what has developed over the last 24 hours? Is there, you mentioned about that combination with Busch, but what else sticks out to you?
I think a lot of people, because we mentioned it earlier, that probably a lot of casual people will play today. And I'd say the most common name right now would be Kyle Larson, especially coming off the championship season. Everyone knows who he is. I think he will garner a lot of ownership. He's also starting in 8th place. I will say short flat tracks really aren't his bread and butter. He's fine at them, obviously. It's Kyle Larson, but there's drivers that are better than him at these track types, and he wasn't the fastest car in practice. He was still fast, but if you're looking to get some leverage, just maybe get off Larson a little bit. I'm not advocating for a full fade, but if you want to be underexposed to Larson to get more Chase Elliott, Kyle Busch in, I'm totally fine with that. And we also have Truex here starting dead last, which Martin Truex Jr. is a short flat track king. He's also good at road courses, which you can kind of throw in here at the LA Coliseum. So just getting away from Larson and Truex I wouldn't mind that, just to add more lineups into Kyle Busch and Chase Elliott, which I personally find to be in smash spots right now.
And by the way, last chance qualifying race 1 is currently going on right now. Denny Hamlin is at the top, Chastain second, Allmendinger running in third. So we'll keep you updated as these qualifying heat races go down. Of course, the main event tonight is at 6 p.m. Eastern time. That's when our rosters will lock there. So of course, I know we got mentioned about FanDuel. I know we talk a lot about DraftKings on this one, but from the FanDuel side of the equation, as you look at those upper tier, is there a different thought process?
It's going to be somewhat similar. Now, FanDuel, there's a much less emphasis on the dominator points. It's just not nearly as important as it is on DraftKings. So you're basically playing finishing position over there. And for the most part, the same drivers do translate over to FanDuel. Just know that Kyle Busch He has more appeal on DraftKings because of the dominator point upside. FanDuel is slightly less, but I still think there's a very strong chance he probably wins this race or finishes second.
You just mentioned about Martin Truex Jr. I want to mention a question in chat where Don was saying, what are you doing with Truex starting all the way to back? That was one of the things that I was really watching with this short track, and the fact, there was one instance where we did get 3 wide, with Truex starting at the back. Obviously place differential is something that they can get there, but you already mentioned dominator points are going to be so huge today because of the limit that is out there.
Right. And the thing with Truex is it's not like he's been fast all weekend and like he's going to just zip through the field. Like he has been struggling. If you just want to look at his practice numbers really quick, we're talking from the first lap, 1 lap data to the 30 lap data. We're talking mid 30s. Like it's been very, very bad for Truex. So yes, he is in the back. And I think he's a fine play. If you were playing cash games, I totally understand playing Truex. He cannot lose you spots. But I think in tournaments, I would rather get some of those guys starting closer to the front because there's a strong chance that Truex might just get stuck in the mud back there.
Yeah, I think that's going to be one of the things of getting different in these bigger tournaments of, maybe you just got to get kind of crazy. And obviously that's where, we're going to be looking at ownership projections and where, who are the drivers that potentially we can find some leverage there. We talk about these upper tier plays. One of those upper tier salaries is Denny Hamlin, $9,800 on DraftKings, $13,000 over on FanDuel. And Stan was talking about, any interest in Denny Hamlin. I feel like because of only 23 drivers, I got interest in everybody.
Yes, for sure. And I actually don't mind Hamlin here because with the last chance qualifier, do you still have that up? I think he's still leading.
Yeah, he's first. Harvick is second, 2 seconds behind, and then Chastain is running third right now.
So Hamlin will be in the late teens, which does make him a good place differential play. I'd probably say I'd like Hamlin over Truex, even though he's starting closer to the front. Hamlin showed some better practice times, and overall he's looked a little bit more faster this weekend. So if it's a decision between Truex and Hamlin, currently I would side with Hamlin. He'll probably have somewhat less ownership as well.
I think the other thing about this is an exhibition race. And so you got to kind of wonder with some of these teams, what is the motivation in this one? Because like I would say one of the coolest videos I saw this week, I want to say I saw on Facebook, it was a time-lapse video of basically from where the Coliseum was before they started constructing this track to where it is now.
Right. And I know a lot of people do have questions about motivation factor, and I feel like some people probably don't care as much as either. And that's something I'm kind of concerned with Martin Truex. It just doesn't seem like he's really out there to really battle as much. Some guys, the younger guys, are just guys that don't really have the biggest names. They obviously want to make a name for themselves out there in LA. So it is something to keep in mind for sure.
Well, and I think the other side of this is when we do get, those starting positions, like what do you do with the person that's starting second?
And that's the thing, because we saw in the heat races, if you're on the outside, that's not a place you want to be. And what sucks is Tyler Reddick, he's going to be starting second. I like Tyler Reddick a lot because he was super fast in practice and he's only $6,700. Problem is he's going to be the outside row. I still like Reddick, but I am lowering my likeness on him just because of that, because he's going to be in a pretty bad spot to start. You're going to want the guys that are starting on the inside.
And his heat race, no one was catching him.
Right.
He was in that clean air and it was amazing. Yeah. By the way, so we're on lap 25 of the last chance qualifying race number 1. Denny Hamlin still number 1, Kevin Harvick 2, Chastain 3, Allmendinger Ware is your top 5 in terms of that one. McLeod and Amarola are off the track, out of the race at this point.
I feel like it's probably going to stay that way. Hamlin, Harvick, and Ross Chastain. So we can probably pencil them in.
I think, and I know you've talked about this throughout this week, you wrote about it over at Awesemo.com, is it's not like you could sit there and go back to, oh, well, last year at this race, what happened? Right. There is no, you obviously you've got correlators of other tracks, but well, there's not a quarter-mile track to correlate to.
No, there's not. The best thing we could do is put in Martinsville, because it's kind of like a mini Martinsville, but even then we're seeing where there's not a whole lot of comparison, because guys that are best in Martinsville, Martin Truex Jr., Denny Hamlin, those numbers haven't really translated so far this weekend.
Joe brings up a great question about saying, since it is a smaller field, only 23 drivers will be in the main event. Does place differential even matter?
It will matter to a degree, but personally for me, I kind of see where he's saying it, where I'm kind of looking more towards finishing position, because there's not going to be enough time for some of these drivers to really get going and get their way to the front, which is some of my concerns with Martin Truex Jr. starting dead last.
Also, you mentioned about very early on the show, next generation car. A lot of unknowns still out there with that one as well.
Exactly. And it has been people calling it the great equalizer. And we have seen some lesser known names be able to put up some pretty good speeds this week. So again, a lot of unknowns. And I really think track position will be king tonight.
By the way, Allmendinger has now moved up to third in this race. 19 laps to go here. These laps go very quickly. It doesn't take, they're going. So, I forget the driver they were talking about who was upshifting and downshifting, which kind of made it believe that they're saying that a lot of these drivers aren't doing much of that today.
Oh yeah, and if you guys were watching the in-car cams, it just looks extremely difficult. I mean, what they're doing out there is pretty impressive.
Yeah, but Denny Hamlin's still leading. We got 17 to go. Of course, if you do got any questions, line those up in chat. We'll get to those. And of course, as we get more starting positions, we'll let you know. Of course, I mentioned about the great promo they got going on right now over at Awesemo.com. That is our green flag promo. Of course, Daytona is 2 weeks away, and we are offering Also Plus NASCAR package that you got to take advantage of for less than $2 per race this season. Yep, you heard that right. Less than $2 per race this season. That's $70 for a full year of Also Plus NASCAR. The pass gives you access to our driver projections, ownership projections, top driver tool, and so much more to give you the edge you need in NASCAR DFS. Be sure to use that promo code GREENFLAG at checkout. This offer is valid through February 20th, so take advantage. An amazing deal we got going on over there at Awesemo.com. $70 for a season-long, year-long pass of Awesemo NASCAR. And of course, you can see it there on the screen of how much you are saving there. So you got to take advantage of that promo that we do have going on there. Sincere Miller says, he goes, so the position DraftKings has right now isn't correct. Yeah,
that is correct. Yes. And there was a tweet earlier that said they weren't going to change it, but they have since revised that and they are going to change it.
Yeah, there was, if you go on DraftKings, they immediately put it out there. It says, draft information, only 23 drivers will advance to the main event and score fantasy points stat from the heat races, and last chance qualifiers are not counted. So the way I'm looking at this is hoping that there's just going to be people that put their lineups in and they just forget about it. And they're not going to update it, from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock. That
is the hopes here, because then we'll have a nice edge on that. Because right now, Truex doesn't have a number by him, and he's in the race, so.
Yeah. Let's go down to our mid-tier range as you look at these drivers who are in that mid-tier range. Is there one driver that has really stuck out to you just based on what you've seen over the last 24 hours?
A couple we already mentioned. I won't go too deep on them, but Tyler Reddick, the problem is starting on the outside line. Definitely isn't that going to be a bit of a help for him. But one guy that has stood out to me so far, I guess he's not really in the mid-range, Ricky Sinhaus, so I'll skip to Christopher Bell here. He's starting at 11th place, $6,800. I know he kind of dipped in practice a little bit, but this is a guy that crushes these track types. Again, didn't really translate too much in practice, but he still had some top 10 times in the 20, 25, and 30 lap. So I still think there's upside for him. I just think he's way too cheap. This is a guy that can compete for top fives at similar track types. I know it's not, again, a direct comparison, but we are working with limited data this weekend.
Yeah, of course. Also, if you are in our NASCAR Discord chat, we'll get the questions popping in there as well. So if you do have any questions, mention, great. I'm sure there's a lot of people want to know this. How many laps are today?
150, and we'll have around 105 dominator points.
Yeah, that is the big one, because I want to say, I don't know if it was you or Phil wrote on the website this week, basically dominators.
Yeah, that was Phil.
But yeah, check that out. Of course, right now, 2 laps to go, Denny Hamlin still on the lead. He's a second and a half ahead of Kevin Harvick. Allmendinger, third. There is about 3 seconds difference between Harvick and Allmendinger, and then Ware coming up fourth. So pretty much, as they're now on the final lap, it's going to be Hamlin, Harvick, and Allmendinger advancing on there.
All right, and just FYI, Harvick was really, really good in practice yesterday as well.
Kevin Harvick's one of those guys, I just feel like he's the death of my lineups.
That's what he was all year for me last year. And then as soon as you completely stop playing him, then he just has this random good race.
Yeah. Of course, if you are trying to watch the race, it is on Fox. If you want to check that out, to check the qualifying that is going on. We still have one more last chance qualifying race to come here. Obviously, and I know you're chiming away with who is going to be in there. But as you now that we've got the first last chance qualifying in there, Denny Hamlin, I mean, he led start to finish there. I mean, does that, Denny Hamlin, he's the second most expensive driver on DraftKings.
Yeah, I do like him. I mean, again, he wasn't in the best heat right there, so I would hope he'd be able to hold the lead the entire time. But I think he's a guy that could definitely probably sneak his way into the top 10, probably can potentially contend for a top 5, depending on how the passing is mid-pack. But Hamlin's a guy that knows his way around these kind of tracks, and he wasn't awful in practice, wasn't the greatest, but it was definitely a lot better than Truex. So I can definitely get on some Hamlin.
Now, when you look at that low tier, which sometimes I might just call the how low can you go tier.
Right.
But obviously when we have 40 drivers, it's a little bit of a different story. But now when you only have 23 drivers, like Ricky Sinhaus Jr. is someone that has come up here, 5,700 over on DraftKings, 7,000 over on FanDuel. Is there other people in that range that kind of isn't Eric Jones at 6,000 somebody you're looking at?
Well, one guy I'll just mention right now is Justin Haley. I know it does not feel good at all playing Justin Haley starting in third place, but he's going to have the preferred line at the beginning. And this is not the same Justin Haley as last year. We're in better equipment. We're now with Colleague in a 31 car, and he has shown some legit speed this weekend. Like looking at the practice times, he is nearly top 5 in almost every category so far. And we saw him. He was fighting off William Byron, Chase Elliott. And those are some of the top tier drivers in NASCAR. It's not going to feel great, but if he's going to go lower owned just because it's Justin Haley and it feels gross starting up front, I'd say there's a halfway decent chance he can hold a top 5, and he is extremely, extremely cheap.
I think the other thing is I'm looking at the spots, I'm looking at the even numbers, the guys that are going to be on the outside, like how quickly could they maneuver their way to the inside of where that you want to be?
It's going to be tough. It's just going to depend on what the people do behind them. Like we saw Chase be able to start to get where he wanted, but then William Byron just completely sent it in and it mixed things up a little bit. But it's definitely, like we were talking about, it's not where you want to be. And I will assume they're going to lose some spots to begin with. I
mean, look at Kyle Larson starting 8th, because there's just so many people because of what he did last year. I mean, he was a smash play every week last year.
Right. I think once we get past like the guys up front, like the reason I'm a little bit down on Reddick, because if I'm playing Reddick starting in 2nd, I'm hoping he can just stay within like the top 4 for a while and not get shuffled back. But a guy like Kyle Larson, I'm not as concerned about that as I would be most drivers, just because it's Kyle Larson. He can pretty much do anything he wants with the car. Again, not the preferred spot you want at the beginning, but I think over the course of 100 laps, he'll be fine. Even though they're going to go by quick, not a normal 100 laps, I still think he'll be okay enough to play.
Robert, because Kyle Busch just chilling in the announcing booth, knowing he's about to lead all 150. That one gave me a good laugh. Stan, mentions about 2 drivers, and one of them I know, is your guy Ryan Blaney. Right. Also mentioning in comparison Logano and Blaney.
So Ryan Blaney starting in 13th, Joey Logano in 4th. It's kind of like the question we've been talking about. Do we want to use the guy that's starting closer to the front, or do we want the guy that starts a little bit further back? For me personally, between the two, I do like the guy starting up front, but if I'm leaning towards like a safer approach, I'm going to go with Ryan Blaney. I feel like by the end of the race anyway, they're going to be close to each other. And at that point, just see the guy starting further back, and he's posted much faster practice speeds as well.
I just saw Kyle sit in that broadcasting booth. I mean, like NASCAR guys, they know how to take care of their sponsors, because whatever drink sponsor he has, make sure he has that in his hand and that logo's pointed right at the camera.
Oh, they're machines with that. Machines.
Yeah. Oh man, I just saw that. That gave me a good laugh there. Of course, if you do have any questions, be sure to line those up in chat, also in our Discord. If you do got any questions on this race and developing lineups, there's going to be people that are playing 3 max, 20 max. Are your rules different at all in comparison where you're playing a 3 max, 20, or 150?
So as I always say, when it comes to roster construction, once you get bigger, I expand my player pool. If I'm playing like a 3 max to a 20 max, I am getting a core, going way overweight in the field on them, and then just kind of filling the pieces in around it. But if you're going 150, that's where you can start playing around and start hedging yourself. But if you're playing 20 max, build a core. And if your core hits, just get the rest of the pieces. And some lineups are going to do well, some aren't. But if you have the core right, for the most part, you should be fine.
You mentioned about the betting side of this race. I know I was looking at some of the lines over at DraftKings Sportsbook a little earlier on today. Obviously there's guys that have got great odds, but you look at drivers who have a history of doing well on these type of tracks. Is there someone with that you look at and say, ooh, that's kind of a juicy line out there?
Well, earlier in the week, I like chased out a lot of plus 700 that has now gone down to plus 600, I believe. I still like it. That's some pretty solid odds. Two guys that really fell back a little bit were Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex. Truex opened up as the favorite with Hamlin. He's now down to plus 1,000. But for me personally, I just have a hard time not seeing like Kyle Busch not win this race unless something happens to him. But as far as long shots go, I wouldn't hate taking shots on guys like Ryan Blaney, Christopher Bell, guys that know their way around these kind of tracks. And if you want to get nuts, it feels really nuts. But Justin Haley at some pretty big odds. If you're just a full believer in the practice speeds, just throw a couple of bucks on it. It might end up working out, especially with the preferred line at the beginning.
Sean mentioned about, one of the terms we throw around, whether we're talking about NASCAR, NBA, NFL, core. And his question was, how many are in the core today? He threw out the number 4.
Like for Kevin Harvick?
No. In terms of how many drivers are your core drivers for today?
All right, gotcha. Well, for right now, if I'm building one lineup, I am probably plugging in Kyle Busch. I'm probably plugging in Chase Elliott. Then after that, guys like Kevin Harvick starting at 19th, who were fantastic in practice. He's only $8,000. He's a very easy guy to fit in there. And if you're looking for cheaper drivers, it's going to depend on how the last chance qualifier goes, because we'll probably get some decent PD plays there. But just for cheap, Ricky Stenhouse, Justin Haley, Daniel Suarez, more of a contrarian option there. But for me, like Harvick, Elliott, and Busch are guys I'd be building around today.
Another question we got in chat, which was mentioned about Blaney, Elliott, Busch, Larson, Sinhaus, Bell, leave $800 on the table. Thoughts? I'll kind of expand on that question. When we talk about 23 drivers, and you mentioned very early on the show about today's one of those races where you're going to get whoever you want into your lineup. Like, how much money do you want to leave on the table?
I've not been able to do crunches yet, so I can't give a definitive answer, but just looking at the pricing overall today, I think leaving salary on the table is definitely a good way to get different, because anybody can build whatever lineup you want. Like, it's not hard to fit in all the studs and then just throwing a cheap driver. So just going with like a mid-range to cheap approach, getting guys a nice balance of guys starting up front and the back, I don't mind that. Now, is there a lesser chance of that working, leaving out some of the studs? Yes, because they're starting up front, can lead some laps and potentially win the race. I don't hate that from a tournament perspective, just to get off some of these duplicate lineups that we are going to see today for sure.
By the way, the last chance qualifier is about to start here. Just notice ahead up on the graphic. Martin Truex Jr. could have raced in this one. He elected not to race, which, I mean, look, I guess, I guess you're at this point, maybe the team just says, we kind of know the car we got. We know what we need. Why take a chance of going out there when we can't do anything about it?
And I also saw a quote that said he wasn't sure he's going to be able to race his way up there anyways. That's why I'm kind of hesitant on Truex, because it just doesn't sound like he has the speed in his car tonight.
With the drivers that we know are in the main event, are you hesitant on anyone?
I am a little bit concerned with some of these mid-range drivers. I'm not 100% sure on yet. Like William Byron starting 7th, like in practice, it was poor. I mean, we're talking low 20s to mid 20s in most of his practice numbers. Joey Logano was pretty slow. He's starting up front though, so he has the track position to work with. And then a couple of these guys we're going to have to wait and see on if they make it in or not. But a lot of these guys in the mid-range are a bit iffy for me. But some of the guys starting in the back, I do like it. The problem is track position is going to be king. So that's why it's a bit of a tough situation here.
One of the guys that we do know is in the main event, Daniel Suarez, 5th qualifying spot here for him. Got a question about our thoughts on Daniel Suarez, 5,900 over on DraftKings, 6,500 on FanDuel.
I like Suarez a lot in tournaments. And if you're for narratives, he's got his team owner Pitbull performing. So just more added juice for him to perform pretty well tonight. But in practice, he was posting some borderline top 10 speed, starting in 5th. he was giving Kyle Busch a run for his money in that heat race. He was the only one that was really coming close to him. So if he can, I think there's a small chance he could hang around the top 5 for the majority of this race.
Yeah, so they are now on lap number 5 of the last chance qualifier, race number 2. Of course, once this race is over, then we're going to know exactly everyone who is in the field there. Of course, as I mentioned, if you do got any questions, be sure to line those up in chat. We will discuss that. Of course, this show is sponsored by Prize Picks. Of course, talk about Prize Picks on the MMA shows that I'm a part of. Of course, be sure to use that promo code Awesemo as they got instant first match deposit up to $100. Also got a great offer going on over there at Prize Picks. We get 1 free month of Also Plus Platinum when you sign up, make a deposit, and play at Prize Picks. You'll receive an email within 24 to 48 hours after to redeem your free month of Also Plus Platinum. And as I always say, when you get that Awesemo Plus membership, you always want to add on Fantasy Cruncher, because that is going to make your life so much easier. I know once we get done here, I'm going to be on Fantasy Cruncher. I'm going to be hammered out and trying to figure out a way of how to make myself somewhat unique. That is really going to be the tough thing here today. But for our single entry players out there, and we know there's a lot of people that, hey, they just play one lineup and that's all they do. They're not a 3 max, a 20 max, a 150 max player. What will be your philosophy to them today in building their lineups?
So if you're playing single entry tournaments, a lot of people, when they're playing a single entry, you don't have any chances to hedge yourself in a lineup. So you're going to probably go with the safer approach. But to that, I say, maybe stick to the guys starting closer to the front, because if people are playing one lineup, they're probably going to throw in guys like Truex, Hamlin, Harvick in the back. You can get completely different just by kind of front loading the guys starting the top half of the field. And even if you get close to using all your salary, just by having most of your drivers starting closer to the front, show to be different enough to not just get duped everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I got, one of the contests I love playing over DraftKings is multiplier contests. I use it as a great way just to build my cash roll. And, but it's one of those things I'm sitting there going, all right, well, I pretty much figure up of everyone's going to have pretty much a similar lineup. Right. It's just it may just come down to that one driver that maybe you go, you got our ownership projections. You look at those ownership projections, say, you know what? Maybe that's the guy I want to take a flyer on, because maybe a good amount of the field won't have that driver in there. That's where I think, to me, when I'm building single entry lineups, I'm more looking at our ownership projections, and of course we'll be updating them as we do go on, of sitting there saying, okay, where can I get leverage on this field?
Right, and it's okay to play chalk guys in there, but at some point you have to find some different plays. Like Chase Elliott, Kyle Busch, fantastic plays. Just because they're chalky does not mean you can't play them. You can still play them, but you can get different in the mid-range or the lower tier drivers. Yeah,
I mean, obviously, I think one of my core thought process is going to be is like, what do I do with someone like Tyler Reddick, Joey Logano, because they're both on the outside at the front of the pack?
Right. And as of right now, Joey Logano is not really projecting that well for me, especially from a point per dollar standpoint compared to most people priced around him. So he's one of those guys I don't really see myself playing too much tonight.
Sean, looking to compare two drivers that we've already talked about in different situations, but Kevin Harvick and Ryan Blaney.
So as of right now, I have some preliminary projections going, just adding in the qualifying spots, and I have them both projected within 0.4 of each other. So for me, a person, I would probably side with Kevin Harvick starting 6 spots further back. Harvick was fantastic in practice. Ryan Blaney wasn't that bad either. But with the speed that Harvick showed, I'll just take the extra added safety there. I think Blaney will be lower owned. So if you need a lower owned driver in your lineup, I don't mind Blaney at all. But I'm going to personally sign with Kevin Harvick heads up.
Stan asking if we are off Chase Elliott now since he's starting 15th.
Oh, no. I mean, Chase Elliott's like a perfect pairing with the guy starting closer to the front, because Elliott's probably not going to have enough time to get up there and lead in last, but he's certainly a guy that can finish top 3. And if he finishes top 3 in a 150 lap race with minimal dominator points, very strong chance he's in the optimal lineup.
Yeah, I think, as we think about how we develop lineups in a normal NASCAR race, it's always like, okay, are we building a lineup with 2 dominators? Maybe you try to get a third dominator in here, but obviously, there's not a ton of dominator points. So like, are you throwing that out the window in terms of that core philosophy because of just how different this race is?
Yeah, like thinking of dominators and stuff. Really, the only guy I have pegged as a dominator is Kyle Busch. Anybody else, I'm really just playing for finishing position today.
Another chase that just got brought up, Chase Briscoe. Of course, we know he is in there in the 6th spot.
Yeah, I personally don't find myself having too much Briscoe. Just looking at some of the numbers that are popping up for me, point per otherwise not looking great compared to other guys around him. I would personally rather play Justin Haley, Daniel Suarez, Ricky Sinhaus Jr., all in very similar price points. Plus, again, he's got that even number, which as of right now doesn't look too pretty to us.
HR mentioned about how many dominators do you want in the big GPP today?
Again, I don't really like classifying a ton of these guys as dominators today just because we have a very minimal amount of laps that guys can actually lead laps. Kyle Busch is like the main guy I'm picking as a dominator. You can throw Tyler Reddick, Joey Logano, hat in the ring just because they're starting closer to the front, but Kyle Busch is the dominator today, and then everybody else are playing for finishing position. So I don't really have any groups set up specifically for that.
By the way, we are now in a yellow flag situation in race number 2. To give you the top 3, it is Bubba Wallace, Alex Bowman, and Kurt Busch are the top 3 as we are in race number 2 in a yellow flag. There was a little bit of a spin out there with the 21 car, who right now is running in 4th.
Also looked like Ty Dillon had contact with the wall as well.
So, another thing to kind of talk about, and I know that we have some coverage of this over at Awesemo, is about, the changes of, drivers going from one team to another. What teams do maybe we need to look at building a core around today?
As far as teams go, I think it's going to be similar last year where Hendrick's the top dog overall. Joe Gibbs is 2nd. Team Penske is 3rd. But the thing is, we haven't, just looking at practice, we didn't really see where teams were dominating. Everybody was kind of all over the place. Like we had Kyle Busch fast. He's on Joe Gibbs. Chase Elliott was fast. He's on Hendrick. Blaney showed some speed. He's on Team Penske. So really for me, I'm not building around teams today. I don't think this is the right race for it.
Next up is Blake asking about, do you think having Ricky Sinhaus Jr. and Justin Haley in the same lineup for a single entry is too risky?
I will say it is pretty risky. It just depends. If you have a lot of chalk in the rest of your lineup, I would say that's fine. If you already have some other contrarian plays, I would probably drop one of the 2 out.
Okay, and CB brings up the question of, is Haley a trap play today, starting 3rd?
I don't think it sounds like it would be a trap play. I totally get it. Haley in the past is a guy you're hoping gets a top 25. And if he does that, you're happy. But we're in a different scenario now. And he's actually in a pretty solid car on a solid team that I think will surprise some people. And it's just hard to ignore the practice speeds. I know he's had the preferred spot to start in his heat race, but he was able to hold off Hendrick Motorsports drivers, which is not an easy task.
And the price tag. That price tag sticks out to you.
Right. Even if he loses, he's probably going to lose a handful of spots. But again, at that price point, if he can just hold himself in a top 8 position, that's fine.
Like, as you look down in that 5,000, 6,000 range, is there a better play than Justin Haley?
You can make arguments for Ricky Stenhouse and Daniel Suarez. I think they're all very close. I would, if it came down to Justin Haley versus like a Ricky Stenhouse, I would probably side with Sinhaus just because he starts a little bit further back, and he was pretty fast in practice too. But if you're talking lower 5K range, Haley is the guy I'm looking at.
CB, I think some people can relate to you in his comment about Ricky Sinhaus Jr., where he says, I thought my divorce gave me lots of tears. Sinhaus has given me lots of tears through the years in DFS.
That is perfect. I can definitely explain Ricky Stenhouse. His aggressiveness gets him in trouble a lot, and he likes to take some other guys with him as well.
Brandon mentioned about Bubba Wallace, who of course is running in 1st right now in this last chance qualifying, asking if he's a must play if he does win this one.
I wouldn't say he's a must play. I know he has the PD upside, but Bubba was arguably the worst driver in practice yesterday. Like, he just had no speed whatsoever.
And he just got passed.
There you go.
He just got passed by Busch, now in the lead. Wallace running 2nd, Burton running 3rd, Dillon running now Dillon actually just moved into the 3rd spot.
Okay. All right.
So of course we'll keep you updated as this one goes up throughout here. Of course, we'll have once this race does conclude, we'll know exactly, then we can really start kind of diving into how we're going to develop our lineups here today. Stan saying, will Dillon be sent to the back because he hit the wall?
He's already in the back anyway. Will make a difference.
Other than Kyle and Chase, who would another 1-2 and must-haves in cash be?
Kevin Harvick would be the next guy. I would say just $8,000. A guy that was fast in practice, starting in 19. It's gonna be hard to get away from him in cash games. And as far as the cheap guys go, it's a little bit of this depends on the last chance qualifier here, but Cole Custer offers a little bit of PD upside down there, starting in 14th. If you need a cheap guy, Eric Jones in 16th, Allmendinger $6,900 in 21st. He's a great road course driver, good at Martinsville in the past. I wouldn't mind that either. And he's on the same team as Justin Haley, who did show some speed as well, obviously.
Next up, asking about Cindric or Reddick. Of course, we know Reddick there in the second position. So, I mean, not to sound like a broken record here, but the one question you have with Tyler Reddick is simply what happens after the first lap? Where is he still on that outside, or has he found his way somehow to get to the inside?
The hope is he's going to find himself on the inside at some point. Now, I do think he falls back a little bit, but I think he'll have enough speed to be able to move up a couple of spots again. And if it came between Tyler Reddick and Austin Cindric, Reddick has been much, much faster this weekend, and Cindric has struggled a lot. And it's also, rookie in the Cup Series, which also does obviously make some a little bit more concerns as well, especially getting into a new car. So for me, I would personally go with Reddick over Cindric, even though he's starting maybe not the best spot.
Mentioned about single entry players, and Chase asked a question saying that he had no idea whether to stack the back or the front for his single entry.
From what we've seen this weekend, I don't really think stacking the back is the best way to go. We've seen the guys that start up front are typically finishing up front. And yes, on paper, it looks good having all those guys in the back because they can move up, but they're not guaranteed to move up. They could just get stuck back there.
Yeah. The other thing to mention here, it was mentioned about comparing Tyler Reddick and Justin Haley. Of course, Reddick starting second, Haley starting third, and the question was related to compare him in terms of finishing position.
So looking at my projections, I have Tyler Reddick finishing several spots ahead of Justin Haley in most scenarios, and I also think he's has much higher chance to leading laps at some point or just getting fast laps. So I know there's a price difference as well. Tyler Reddick, he's coming in at $6,700, and then you have Justin Haley all the way down there at $5,300. Point per dollar wise, they're not extremely far off for where they're priced, but I mean, if it had to come down to it, I think Tyler Reddick has the higher ceiling.
Point for dollar is a term that we talk about in DFS. It doesn't matter what the sport is. As you look at point for dollar, maybe look at some of those ones you say, man, that's one that I look at really juicy.
I mean, it sounds weird because he's very expensive, but Chase Elliott is right now my best point per dollar play in the slate.
I don't know if Jordan's looking at the chat, but Jordan, I'm just saying, Chris and Jake, I can see the similarities there. Yeah, Jordan, you know I'm right on that one. Jake does all our NHL stuff. Yeah. You and Jake, very, very similar looks. Let's just say that. As of course we're 15 minutes left here. By the way, we're once again under a caution here in race number 2 here. Of course, this is the last chance qualify. Of course, lock time is at 6:00 each time. Of course, we'll be here for another 10 minutes. And of course, following us will be NBA Live Before Locks. Guys, get you ready for tonight's NBA slate, which means me sitting here just doing crunches upon crunches on NASCAR and NBA. But of course, if you do have any questions, be sure to line that up. Top GPP flyer.
I think Justin Haley, Tyler Reddick, Justin Haley. These are guys that keep popping up for me, but for where they're starting, people might be scared to pull the trigger. But I do think they have that upside, especially with the speeds they posted so far this weekend.
Here's a question. Could Tyler Reddick just get out in front right from the start?
I don't think it. I mean, obviously there's a small chance. I just don't see it happening, especially from what we've seen so far.
I mean, it's one of those things like when we're talking cash or single entry, like how do you just not just right start at Kyle Busch?
Right, exactly. I mean, Vegas has adjusted to that as well. I mean, we're like right in tune with what Vegas is thinking, and I just have a hard time seeing Kyle Busch not at least half of this race.
By the way, we are 15 to go here in race number 2. Kurt Busch right now is in the lead. Then it's Ty Dillon and then Bubba Wallace So those are your top three right now with 14 to go. Of course, we'll pay attention once that race does complete there. So, of course, as I mentioned, you got any questions, be sure to line that up. John asking, which two would you want? Larson, Hamlin, Logano, and I'm guessing he meant Blaney.
I would go with Larson and Blaney in those scenarios.
Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, geez, how do you avoid Kyle Larson? I mean, it's one of those things like, hey, until he doesn't treat me well, I might as well just smash play.
Right. I mean, he's not my favorite play today, but he's still a very good play.
Yeah. HR brings up the point. He says, what's the point of playing the number 2, 3, 4 drivers if Kyle Busch is going to lead the race the whole time?
Finishing position, they can still pick up fast laps. Now, the vast majority of that will still go to Kyle Busch, but if they hold their spots, I mean, you still get significant points for finishing in second, third, and fourth place.
You think this is going to be a clean race?
I think for the most part, it's cleaner. It'll be cleaner than people think, but I would assume there's going to be some spinouts. Tempers will flare. You can only drive so close to each other, bumping and banging. Like, you've been in traffic before. You're in the Florida traffic like I am. It's not fun out there after a while.
What are you talking? Look, I was in LA a couple months ago. Give me the Florida traffic over LA traffic any day of the week.
Well, I'm coming from rural Ohio, so this is definitely a big difference.
Yeah, I've been here all my life, and we are now on the third caution of race number 2 here, last chance qualifying. So right now, Bubba Wallace is in the lead here. Burton running second, Bowman running third.
All right.
As I mentioned, hey, we're going to have a clean race. Oh, yeah, we just hit third caution here in the last chance qualifier, race number 2.
This one seems to be pretty racy so far.
Yeah. Let's see here. Is it optimal to play Haley if he finishes like 7th and Busch still wins?
So as of right now, I have Haley finishing around like 8th, 9th place, which is probably a little bit conservative for me. But even then, it's still giving Haley close to 30 points, which is 5.6x on DraftKings, which compared to the guys down in that price range really isn't that bad. So I'd say it's still fine.
You know, someone mentioned about how they made a decision they're going to leave 1,200 on the table in terms of the large field GPP, you know, which kind of makes me think about, you know, every time we're talking about NASCAR DFS of, you know, when we're talking about running our crunches of sitting there going, you know, how much do we want to leave on the table? I mean, I know today's just, it's a tough day to get different just because we only have 23 drivers to choose from. Well, right. Some people may have chose from more than 23 drivers. We hope there's people out there that did that.
Yeah, it's for sure. Like, salary is always the biggest thing when it comes to, you know, just getting different. Because any sport, if you're just using the full 50K, it's a strong chance you're going to be having a similar lineup to most people. Just leaving any money on the table is going to be able to help you get different today. And this is a good slate to do it because, again, lack of drivers and the pricing is very soft. Like, you can make a great lineup using all the guys that are like 8,500 and below. That would be fine with that.
Just kind of looking at, you know, the drivers that we know are already in the race that maybe we really haven't touched on. I don't think we've touched on Christopher Bell, Cole Custer, I think his name, that hasn't come up either.
Yeah, Christopher Bell is a guy I really liked early in the week. I probably slid on him a little bit just because practice wasn't as impressive as I maybe thought it would be, but he's still a guy that put up some pretty strong times. I mean, the later we got on in practice, looking at the 20, 25, 30 lap runs, we're talking some top 10 speeds from him, 6th in the 30 lap. And Christopher Bell is amazing at short flats. Like, he had multiple top 5 contending races last season at them. He's in a JGR car below $7,000. You're not going to see that for the rest of the season. So I think this is definitely a good spot to take advantage of Bell. And he's kind of in that dead area, starting at 11th place. A lot of people are looking at the front. A lot of people are looking at the back. Not a lot of talk about the middle.
Boss man Alex over in the score chat as projections are going to be updated as we go forward here. So really, once we get done with the show here in about 10 minutes from now, you know, after 5 o'clock each time, and we know where the starting position are going to be, you're a premium member of Awesemo.com. You want to go over there, check out projections, driver projections, ownership projections, top driver tool. And of course, use that green flag promo if you're not a member, where you can get a year's worth of Awesemo NASCAR coverage for only $70. It's less than $2 a race. So you got to take advantage of that over there. Of course, one of the great, way I build all my lines, especially when we're talking about 20 max, 150 max. You know, I'm using our projections, and then I'm doing all my crunches. And you know, for maybe someone who's new to NASCAR DFS, and you know, they're building multi, you know, 20 max lineups, you know, where would you lead them in direction of how to build those multiple lineups?
Well, like we mentioned earlier, we got to try to build around a core, because if you're going in there without a game plan, like just completely just picking drivers, you're going to be all over the place. And by the end of it, you're probably not going to have the best correlation amongst your lineups. And if you're doing a 20 max contest, you want to build around a core, because if that core hits, then there's a good chance the large majority of your lineups are all moving at the same time. And then the last piece fillers are kind of getting you there over the edge, or they're also sinking your lineup. So I'd be building around a core and just starting from top to bottom, really. I don't want to start with the lower tier drivers. Get the guys you want in the most first, because you don't want to sacrifice those guys, and then just do the last piece fits.
Yeah, of course. We got about 5 minutes here left in the show. If you do have any questions, be sure to line those up. By the way, Prize Picks has put up some prop bets over there for today's NASCAR race. I want to thank one of the guys in the chat who brought this to my attention there. Sean saying over under 40.5 laps led for Kyle Busch in Prize Picks.
I want to Prize Picks right now, but their props at 40.5. I think there's a pretty decent chance he can get the over on that.
Yeah, there's only over at Prize Picks, you only got two who are listed for laps led. You have Kyle Busch at 40.5, Tyler Reddick at 18.5.
I'd be more comfortable with the Kyle Busch one, because again, Tyler Reddick's gonna be a little bit of a guessing game there, especially on the outside lane. So I'd be pretty comfortable with the Kyle Busch over on 40, and 40 laps is gonna go by in just like 5 minutes.
Exactly. Which leads to fastest laps. And if you look at the fastest laps for Kyle Busch, 29.5. The only one listed is Chase Elliott at 16.5.
Mm-hmm. Chase was extremely fast in practice, but again, you got to keep in mind he's going to be stuck in the pack for a little bit. So fast laps, I wouldn't be extremely confident on that. But Kyle Busch up front, he's going to have the clean air at the beginning. I kind of like both overs on that for Kyle Busch.
Yeah, I don't know how you wouldn't go over.
Right.
It's
gonna be hard not to.
I think you would be sweating that thing out if you hit that under.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, that one's not going to be easy for you. Christian, any love for Daniel Suarez today?
Yeah, I think he's a good tournament play. I don't think he's going to get a ton of buzz. We talked about the Pitbull narrative earlier. Not that you can quantify that, but it is there. But he was fast in practice. We're talking borderline top 10 speeds. He's going to have the track position in the heat race. He was kind of hanging there with Kyle Busch and nobody else was. So I don't mind taking some flyers on him in tournaments.
Let's see, Reddick or Bowman final piece on FanDuel?
FanDuel, with that being more so focused on finishing position, Reddick has had the much better car this weekend.
Do you think salary is relevant tonight? Can I leave 3,000 on the table?
I would say that's fine. The pricing is as soft as it's going to be all year. The highest price guy is Kyle Larson. You have JGR cars priced in the 6K range. I think that's fine tonight.
Brandon's saying this is a small track. Very much. It's only a quarter mile. There's going to be so much bumping using trying to pass, spin outs, and nowhere to go will lead to wrecks. I kind of feel like that's going to be maybe potentially something we see play out, in the final, quarter of this race.
Right. And it's not going to be like a huge collection of drivers, at least in my opinion. That can certainly happen where a guy up front spins, and the damage isn't going to be super significant though. And I'm not really playing this as a wreck fest from what I've seen so far this weekend. Yeah, there's going to be some spin outs. And if you have those guys, it's not going to feel great, but I'm not going to game plan around like a Daytona.
By the way, we're still under a caution in race number 2 here. So we'll start to wrap this one up here. Double D says, I'm leaving 6,900 on the table. Is that too much? Woo. It's a lot of salary.
I'm not yet to build any yet because I'm waiting on the final order, but 6,900 might be pushing it. I assume you're fading the large majority of everybody 9K and above, which again, it's a decent way to get contrarian, but as long as you have some guys up front and a good balance everywhere else, it's fine. Is it probably the best lineup on paper? No, but again, it's NASCAR. Crazy things can happen.
By the way, we are back to green flag, 7 laps to go here in the last chance qualifier, race number 2. Bubba Wallace right now in the lead. Burton trailing him, and he actually just took the lead as got that inside, which is going to be something. I think it's going to be a big part of that. Chris, anything you want to leave everyone with here before we get out of here?
I would say just enjoy the race. This is going to be an outlier race. So if you are planning on playing for the rest of the season, don't put a lot of what happened in today's race for the rest of the year, because this is a complete outlier. We're not going to see this again. So it's more of an expedition, fun, all-star-ish kind of race.
And of course, we'll be back in 2 weeks for the NASCAR Live Before Lock show to get you ready for the Daytona 500. Coming up next here on Awesemo is NBA Live Before Lock. So keep it locked here for all the NBA coverage you need. Apparently, we got trade in the NBA that went down just a while ago based on chat. I'm not sure if it's true. I'm guessing it's true since everyone's talking about chat. And as I see Jordan shaking his head, clearly it's true that Karis LeVert has been traded to the Cleveland Cavaliers. So stay tuned for NBA Live Before Lock. Hope everyone has a great evening, and we will talk to you in 2 weeks for the Daytona 500. Have a good day, everybody.